When I think about Black mental health and I think about my own journeys through some really tough things from a familial standpoint, I don't think that this is the part we've ever really got to deal with, right? Like, we know that for years we have been working on reparations, right? Like, we have been trying to get the economics together because, our thought process is, hey, if we can get the economics, we can get the materials, then we can get the resources, then we can move on and do et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's time that we pause this, right? We live in America. We know that our entire foundation is built on our inferiority. We know that even when African Americans were enslaved, and when Africans were enslaved, we know that it has always been about creating our own culture and protecting everything that they say we are not within our own communities, right? I'm reading How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith, and he talks about how at the Monticello plantation, the tour guides shared how the enslaved children would, play on Sundays, how they would still have wedding ceremonies, how they found little inscribed, tablets, essentially teaching one another how to read and write, even though we know that that was illegal. And so you talk about joy being an act of resistance. I think that we have to recognize that that is our story, right? Like, I think so often we're so, the messages in regards to slavery. This is why I think this book is so important. And I absolutely just love the way in which it is written. I would actually say it's a pretty easy read. Clint Smith I didn't know, but he's a poet. And I mean, this book it's amazing. It's very polished. He's a very polished writer. But when you think about the stories that we're told about ourselves, in that, right, like how the word is passed, how we talk about slavery, how we talk about African Americans, so much of that is like what we are not, what we ain't doing, what we, and it's like, it's to the point where, it's always been on the mainstream media, but now it's coming out of our own mouths. And I don't even think we even know anymore. I think we've gotten to the point where we're like, Black men are this, Black women are that. I had just published this piece on Medium, and I was like, oh, I'm so proud of myself. It's 10 minutes. And I was like, no, this has bias. This is coming from hurt. I was even walking down the street and I even noticed just how my attitude was towards this specific Black man. And I was like, oh, I'm actually coming at him with all the other hurt, all the other stuff that I've been through. I don't even know this person. You know what I mean? So I know that takes a deep level of consciousness and awareness, but I just think that we have to start telling stories about the resistance, telling stories about the very real acts of joy. Because if you let it, this world is going to make you think that you're crazy. I just made a YouTube video. I was a little tired recording that one. I don't know. I was trying to get my thoughts together. It was morning. I had quite a few things I was doing, but I spoke about how, when you talk about Black mental health, and I was just kind of speaking about, just how the circumstances that we are in oftentimes warrants the type of attitudes and behaviors that we may be demonstrating at the time. So, we keep talking about anxiety and depression, and we feeling like, a person can feel helpless because you're like, how do I get myself out of this? When the reality is that, well, hold on. You know what I mean? Look at your situation. Look at what you're dealing with. You're dealing with instability. You're dealing with a lack of resources. You may be unemployed. Like, your mental health is not going to be skyrocketing right now. You see what I'm saying? That's kind of like that expectation to go above and beyond, in impossible circumstances. Now we've always had to do it, but just recognize that, like, when Western psychology hits the forefront and you have this virality of, like, TikTok and therapy coaches and all these different things, people are speaking into a void. You know what I mean? People get online and they're speaking from their own personal privilege and their limited scope of experience. You know what I mean? Like, most of these people, today, a lot of people are just getting certifications, like taking about a seven course class, and it's like, now you're certified to be a life coach or speaking to somebody's life, and they got all these letters and things behind their names. But when you start Googling it, it's like, oh, wait a minute. So you've actually not gone to the College of Psychology, and you've actually not done, so you have to be careful with that. there's a lot of self-proclamation today. And in that, I do think that when you start talking about mental health, we refuse to kind of sit with the bias. And I spoke about that in the video, just how, as Black Americans, it's really troublesome being in in this Western world where vast majority of psychiatrists are white. The entire industry of psychiatry and psychology and mental health is white, and it's incredibly racist, just to be frank. So I was thinking about this in terms of my own family. I was thinking about academia. There's been a lot of conversations. A lot of people today are kind of waking up, and we're talking a little bit more about how there is absolutely no interest typically in the Black student who expresses a love or interest in reading, and all of our interest goes to entertainment. One being because I think we can understand it. Two being I think it's it's escapism, and then three, it's the highest reward, right, in terms of material access and capital gains. So for the young student who may be gifted, I think it's incredibly isolating for so many of us, right? Bell Hooks talked about this in her book. I don't know if it was Rock My Soul. It could have been Salvation. But one of those books, she spoke about how during segregation, there were no more gifted programs for Black students, right? She talked about how Black students were no longer selected to be in gifted programs. And prior to segregation, prior to integration, during integration, when Black students started to integrate with white students, there were no more gifted programs for Black students. Black students were no longer selected in gifted programs. And then fast forward to today, and I think even during the millennium, there was no more programs for gifted students, right? We know that typically as we began to integrate, we know that white Americans went further out, right? And so they took all the resources in the programs with them. And that often did include like gifted programs. And so it's very interesting when you study the deterioration of public education. And you just kind of see how, like gentrification, many of the resources and the things that would at one point make students, put them on the path to college and to have resources and to be knowledgeable, that was essentially like no more, as the schools as white Americans kind of started to take their kids out of the schools and move further out. So fast forward to today. Right. And we know that giftedness, it's accumulation of things. It is a little bit of your experience. It's a little bit about how the brain works, how the brain perceives information, which I think you could maybe study that from like a fetus, how the fetus may be raised or what experiences they're, experiencing. But I do think a little bit of it is genetics as well. So there's accumulation of factors. I do think a lot of it is biological, and then some of it is environmental. And I think, So you have that, right? And so when you have a general idea of African Americans, it's like impoverished, it's all these really negative things. And so when you meet a child who could potentially be gifted, who has this level of emotional sensitivity, this child is cast away. Okay. I remember meeting this man when I used to go down to the public library, and he told me he was really good at playing piano and he loved it, and all these different things. And I remember him just telling me that, like, I don't know what happened. Somewhere along the lines, his parents got him on medication, and ever since then he's just he I don't know if he was homeless, but he was definitely perceived as in a very negative way. He was in it was basically seen as he has a mental health disorder, but I remember speaking to him, and at the time I was really young. I think just quite naturally, just being a little bit more courageous and, kind of taking risk at the time. I happened to meet this person, and we had a phone conversation and everything. And speaking to him, he was like, no, I'm good as long as I take my meds. But his lifestyle and just who he was as a person, it didn't align with any of the stereotypes that you may have had about him, or any of the labels essentially that were placed on him. Right. And so please bear with me. I'm really working to kind of get the language for this topic. Like I said, I haven't really done any deep studies in regards to mental health, so this one's a little bit hard to kind of get through. But I just remember thinking, like, simply, I'm like, wow, there's really nothing wrong with this person, like, I know you were probably like, well, you didn't really know him, but yeah, I know, but like, there really wasn't anything wrong with him, essentially. And so I say all that to say, to be Black and to be gifted, it's not necessarily to have a target on your back, but it is to be incredibly isolated, and gifted is just exceptionalism, right? So a little bit of that is a little bit of willpower, desire, a little bit of that is circumstances, environments, the things that you're into. I know we don't really envision it, but there are a lot of Black kids who are sitting at home reading all different kinds of things, interested in other things. I know that when you think about Black life, the only thing that's ever depicted to you is struggle, is abuse, is addiction, is basketball, is, but there's so many of us out there who, even growing up, it was like we were just into other things. And it's unfortunate because there's no place in society for us. When you start talking about our family and our family lineage and connections, detaching from our emotions was a means of survival. It was how we lived, it was how we got throughout the world. And so for many of our family members, they don't want to think, they don't want to feel, because what they have endured is very painful, right? You have to think this is the generation that has seen up close and personal the detriments and the real life consequences and the impact of the crack era, right? This is the culture that grew up with parents who were alive during the civil rights movements. Like, you have to understand, like, this is real life. This is not just something that happened so far away. And the people who have had the material comfort and the people that have been protected, intellectually, who went on to have, gifted programs and all those different things, they're so far removed from this history and this reality. They're so far removed from these experiences and in all the ways in which they may take interest in the Monticello plantation tours and all the ways they may take interest in, Black history. They fail to realize your family members, your grandmother that you go see on the weekends in Florida and vacation with in the summer, she was partaking. She was there. She was partaking in some of that. She was on the other side of history, but she was there. You see what I'm saying? And so it's like, I just think to be a Black person, I know we talk about the two faces, and I'm going to wrap up here, but it really is to exist in polarity, right? It is to exist and act like nothing is happening, nothing is going on in the world. It's equality, it's freedom, it's all these different things. You can do whatever you want to do, while at the same time really grappling with the despondence. You know what I mean? The psychological displacement, the psychological despondence, the disconnection that really does exist within our communities. You know what I mean? And it's a lot. It really is a lot. And I think for so many of us, you're carrying secrets, you're carrying shame. It's no wonder why you're going to have at some point a psychotic break. You know what I mean? You're carrying trauma. You're carrying the weight of being in this country that has never given you anything, you know what I mean, but demands so much of you, right? You're carrying the real weight of the implications of even having a breakdown, of even, opening up about your emotions. And I think that's why if I ever did a healing circle, it would be for men and women, because I tell people this all the time. Listen, Black men's experiences are not a one-off. I don't know who said that your experiences were so isolating. Like, you as a Black man, you're the only person who's going through this. No, we are all going through this. Black men share certain experiences about not being able to share emotion. I can relate to that. You see what I'm saying? Like, as a woman, like, hello, so many Black women can relate to that. Like, our softness is often deemed as a threat. We have to be strong. You look back at some of those pictures of the enslaved women, and it's like, yeah, I mean, back in the day, I don't want to say back in the day, but at that time, they were living in a time where white men could rape them at any given point, and there was no recourse. There was no legal recourse, right? Domestic violence, I tell you guys this all the time, was not made illegal until 1997. You see what I'm saying? So it's just like, the trauma that we carry, the grief that we carry is collective. It is not a Black man only thing. No, it is not. That is a lie. We are all dealing with the same things. We are all dealing with the same things. So I just think at the end of the day, I just wanted to come on and say, like, our mental health crisis is collective. It's not Black men need their own room. Black women need their own. We all need to be in here together. Okay. It is a collective cohort. And I know we talk a lot about, sexual abuse and things like that. I know for myself, it's not my field, right? I don't want to be insensitive to it, but it's not my field in the sense that, in regards to certain aspects, right? And so I don't want to be insensitive and I don't want to shut down anybody's experience. But I think when you start talking about the experiences that we do have as Black people, I don't know. I just think there are so many more similarities that Black men and Black women endure and that we've had to kind of go through, and even in our familial lineage, right? Being gifted, right? Those gifted students didn't go away, right? Those students that really are exceptional, it didn't go away, right? Think about the writers of the 1800s and so forth. Like, it didn't go away. That didn't just leave, right? But when you have fundamental beliefs that are embedded within this culture that say Black people are crazy, Black people are this, Black people are that, fast forward to today, and it's like, oh, all we care about is entertainment. Like, this stuff is so incredibly harmful and it's incredibly dehumanizing. And so what I was talking about, and I said I was going to do a series and a bit of a segment, is really working on humanizing the Black experience, right? If you're struggling with mental health, look at your circumstances. What is going on here, right? And I'm not saying it in a place of critique. I'm saying in a place of like realism. You know what I mean? We're human beings at the end of the day. So I just think that there is this level of insensitivity when it comes to our existence. And we really have to start humanizing one another and saying, hey, listen, you're trying to figure out if you're going to get approved for housing. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do with the kids in school. You're trying to figure out, your car is messed up. You got to get to work. Like, of course, you're going to be struggling with some type of mental health, right? And we just don't get that level of compassion. And the people who have never really been put in these either or catastrophic kind of like situations, they are on the forefront, right? White people, privileged individuals, they are at the forefront, and they always have been the ones who've had the podium. So they can't relate to that. Think about influencer culture, for example. You have a bunch of privileged kids, okay? Privileged kids, African Americans who grew up with a completely different background, completely different familial lineage, okay? God bless them. We ain't hating. But it's like, of course, they can't come out and actually be something influential. So they're going to feed you commercialism. They're going to feed you capitalism, right? And they're not, I don't think that we have to critique them and be like, oh, they're bad people. It's just that they're not your people, right? The people who are doing the work of the mental health, it's a little less flashy, but they can relate to you. So I'm going to end there. I hope that this gave a little bit more of a little bit more context to the video that I uploaded, and we'll talk soon. Peace.